It's kind of raining, so it's nice to be here. I have the great pleasure to have Beatriz Anchorena, who leads the Public Information Agency that is responsible for privacy and managing privacy and security. I've been working for her since she started, and after many years of working in the government, she leads this project of regulation in Argentina for data protection. That was kind of the pioneer. It was a bill that started in Argentina, and she's been working for the last 20 years. She's leading the process very efficiently, in an open way. She partnered with people from the private sector, public sector, civil society, and she's been introducing new ideas on how this regulation may be implemented. She was so kind to come here. We have people from all countries of Latin America and online from countries that are from Asia, the United States, Africa, and Latin America. Beatriz, you've been here for just a few years in the agency, right? Thank you very much, Olga. Yes, I would like to acknowledge the South School of Internet Governance for having invited me. There are many conferences that are online, so it's great to have a conference that is in person here. And it's great to have this dialogue discussing this topic on data protection law. As Olga said, I've been over the last 7 months leading the Public Information Access Agency. It was a public hearing and an appointment that they designated my position or designated me a few months ago. On the one hand, we have the Public Information Access, and we have a law enforcement agency for data, for personal data. So one of the commitments that we fulfill in February this year was to commission regulation in place to update our law of personal data. That was one of the pioneers that dates back to the year 2000. So this data protection law was like kind of pioneer in the region. And this dates back to the year 2000. There's a lot of water under the bridge in the world of technology, in the world of the internet. And it's mandatory to kind of update this law in line with the new generation of data protection laws. For example, Brazil has made changes to that law. Ecuador follows suit. We have some procedures in Ecuador, Costa Rica, and Chile. So Argentina is on board with the new generation of regulations. And how do we approach the changes in this data protection law? First, in response to the challenges posed by the digital economy and the technological advances. Also considering the harmonization or the need to harmonize with international standards, whether they are regional or international. Specifically, the European Union. Why the European regulations? Because if we date back to 2003, we were declared as the right country or adequate country for the European Union, and we are in the process of assessment and evaluation, and we believe that it's important to keep that status. The world has become global, and data travels from one place to another. And we know that this is very, very difficult, very challenging to regulate. So to have some principles and consensus will allow us to have the technology in place to drive the economic development. Because the state should lead this development process, and the technology is the right place to attain the quality life standards that are so required by our citizens. And also, we approach sovereignty, and we have also a community approach, a local approach, because it's not a one-size-fits-all and borrowing regulations from abroad. We believe that Argentina is capable to have talent or to have also customization of the regulations here that can govern the marketplace for a few years. And that's why we propose a neutral language, because this cannot be outdated in 2 years' time. So this is one of the key issues. Let me tell you something, how we went about this process and where we stand, because we're in the middle of the process. And some piece of news of the draft resolution. The draft resolution is posted in the Public Information Access Agency website. You can download it from our website, where you will find the documents that we took as a reference to draft the bill. And first and foremost, let me tell you that we did an international benchmark, resorting to the best practices, guiding principles. We gather with other agencies from Spain, from Brazil, from the European Union, especially addressing the European regulation. And we perform an assessment and a survey at the international level. We had UNESCO on board because they drafted something on ethics for artificial intelligence. And then we had local dialogues with civil society organizations, with business chambers, with professionals, practitioners in the industry, lawyers, and other disciplines especially involved in data protection laws. And also we had roundtables with the public service. We even gathered former authorities of the Law Protection Agency in Argentina, Data Protection Agency in Argentina, that have been regulating and governing this activity. And we organized a conference to show the main guidelines and the consensus reached when drafting this law. We organized a conference in the Centro Cultural Kirchner venue, where we had speakers from Brazil, from Colombia, from Chile. We had the rapporteur for the United Nations on personal data protection, the European Union attending, and a whole bunch of local or domestic stakeholders. So we have a participatory open dialogue that is so necessary for us. And as of September 12th, we had an open consultation to the citizenry that was postponed until October 11th, where we had 120 proposals and comments or reviews. And we are analyzing all the reviews, comments, and revision of all documents to have the final draft of this bill that should be sent to Congress anytime soon. Let me highlight some of the main points or items of the bill in the way Argentina intends to address the data protection law. And how Argentina would like to guarantee the rights of people to the data protection law that is enshrined in Article or Section 43 of the Argentinian Constitution. And if we date back to the law of 2000, that does not involve humans or human beings, but also legal persons. So, to be in the same wavelength with the rest of the world, this is just for human beings. Also, with new definitions, we updated some of the definitions. We even extended the scope of sensitive data, including genetic data and biometric data. Something that is key is the enforcement out of the country of this law, because if we have organizations that process intensively data that do not reside in Argentina, that law is enforced for jurisdiction in Argentina, and they need to appoint a representative for Argentina. Another key issue is a proactive and demonstrated responsibility as a new principle, where it's key to have demonstrated or proven, because that includes a traceability to demonstrate that they are complying with the law and that data protection is being carried out. We extended the legal databases for the treatment of this data. We still have this old law where you have the consent and then the pleas or the exceptions. And then we have the specific functions of the state or the role of the state, contracts, legal compliance, and legitimate interest, where you have different features. Consent is key. It has to be open, free, unbiased, and it cannot be tacit. There's a specific section for boys, girls, and teenagers that can give their consent as of the age of 13 in line with the Civil Code of Argentina, and they enjoy special treatment, and that underscore the use of this data. Also, this includes the issue of security, something that is widely discussed here. We propose 48 hours to communicate the incident to the enforcement agency. And then you have all the protocols that are triggered in connection with this topic. And I believe this topic in Argentina has security breaches, whether it is in the public or in the private sector, and it's on the rise. International wires is exactly the same thing, because every single day and all the time data are traveling. So on the one hand, you have the assessment or the adequate assessment that Argentina performs to other countries, the conventions, the Ibero-American law passed recently with different contract clauses that we deemed appropriate, and then we have the exceptions. But there's a specific chapter here where Argentina is actively involved in the Ibero-American network of personal data protection and in the Privacy Assembly that holds the International Conference of Istanbul. Turkey and Argentina is part of the Global Privacy Assembly Committee, where we participate actively in order to agree upon these issues and to have a shared vision together with other countries on a human right that is so important as personal data protection. And then we have the overarching rights, the right to challenge, suppression, portability, and non-inference. We do have a section dedicated to automated decisions and profiles that give us the chance, or gives the chance to the owner of those rights to challenge this in a semi-automatic or automatic way and to ask for human intervention. And what do we require in the case of bias or non-discrimination, or to describe patterns of a certain algorithm? Also, the law provides the obligations for the responsible parties, especially data protection by design. That is, when you design a proposal, a prototype, or a new technology, for its inception, we consider data protection in the planning of that product. And this is also covered in the public sector. And in some of the cases, we do require impact assessments. We have a legislation that provides that all databases should be registered. However, we are transitioning towards some other kind of registrations or registrars of delegates and representatives of personal data in the case of extra jurisdictions. So we're not going to have the analysis of the personal database, but those responsible parties with their delegates of personal data. The proposal also regulates creditworthiness or a credit history, something that is promoted in Argentina. We believe that we should protect the personal data in terms of credit history and everything that has to do with the agency. That is, what are the tools in order to regulate? So this law should update the tools that we have to the agency. For example, we had to test a few elements dating back to the law of 2000s. We updated the fines. We updated some of the penalties. We made changes to the penalties. However, we should have well-balanced and deterrent decisions and new elements or tools in the agency. Something voluntary for dispute settlement, for example. New tools or instruments in connection to the best practices and to the promotion of personal data, raising awareness for citizens to take care of their personal data, because we know full well there are citizens or there are people that are being hacked, whether it is their emails, bank accounts, or other information. So it's great to create, raise awareness of personal data protection, restoring the democracy and to promote the information technology, especially with this kind of vision of technology, having imbued the personal data protection and to be involved and part of a development project protecting privacy. Okay, some highlights here. One thing is how fast you have conducted this process, and there is no fear of public consultation, because in Argentina there's always something like this. I believe that this was useful, but once you protect or you make the decision, and then you have consultations to the private sector, civil society, public sector, international stakeholders, people that were predecessors in other administrations and with other political parties, and then to process the information in the initiatives that you have underway. So I celebrate this. Also, there's something useful because those people that are going to be the delegates of personal data, this is kind of the old principle. At that time, it was okay. However, here we have large amounts of data in different formats and higher speeds that are exponential. So before it was a database, and right now with the database responsible parties, how do you manage? How do you approach those responsible parties that manage these processes? It's because it's what we have in the cybersecurity office, where we have these minimum requirements for cybersecurity, and we do have an interesting or a delegate or party, and sometimes it's difficult to pinpoint who that contact is and to have a personal connection so that person could be updated. And so, we could have these responsibilities in place. Yet the figure of that party is for the public and for the private sector. And in the public sector, I think that you're referring to the cybersecurity and the minimum requirements that you're mentioning. It seems to us that we should have best practice communities to approach, for example, this kind of personal data protection network in the public sector. involving third parties to have these heterogeneities or data processes, because the main role of the state is to build policy making of high quality, and for this you require data. Those policies are evidence-based policies that have been implemented for a long time. So how do we have this high quality with high quality personal data protection? So it seems to us that we do have, or we do require training in all sectors, in the private and in the public sector, especially building the profiles and training people and giving them the necessary skills, because they need to comply with the law and they are responsible for this for this evidence or for these protocols or profiles. How do we achieve these highly qualified profiles that are going to elevate their skills or talents on the part of the state and to build policy making? There are many lawyers in the audience, and we do have online questions. Could you please identify yourself or introduce yourself? Yes, my name is Lucia, and I come from the University of Buenos Aires. We're part of a civil society organization where we participate in the comments and in the reviews in the bill or the draft resolution. And you said that this was subject to review. I don't know, have you made any changes? And can you comment on this? Yes, I do have some changes in mind. Some of them have to do with federal enforcement. We're making improvements to that sections. We have 11 sections and 76 subsections in the law. So this was a pending issue, and the idea was to take more time to receive more contributions to make room for these changes. Also, we have a transparency process where there's a commission of personal data protection that was interesting to include that commission, and we have dialogues and roundtables with the different provinces. We do have some changes that when we included them in the proposal, they really improved the proposal. And there are two dimensions of this, of changes or improvements. The first one is an improvement that has to do with legislation or a better expression of the idea, or polishing some of the concepts and the drafting or the wording. And on the other hand, you have the issue of a deep debate in terms of vacancies, or probably to cover some vacuums that we had, because we have to update the law. We need to have a more comprehensive view. You need to think that this is a draft resolution, then you have the Senate and the regulation and the enforcement on the part of the executive, and then you have all the instruments that they need to be devised in the agency in order to make these rules possible. So there's a lot of work ahead of us. And many times, many of the stakeholders are eager to include this in the draft resolution, but let me tell you that we have other instances. And those other instances, such as regulation, are easily changed once you make the progress. But with legislation, it's not that simple to make changes. So we need to have a technical and political view on this process to seek that better solution or a better solution. And probably you cannot be perfect, because if you are a perfectionist, you operate in a vacuum and it's impossible to fulfill that law. Or probably you lose the status in parliament. So you need to be very tactical and try to leverage the windows of opportunities that we have at this time. I have three additional questions, but there's some other people that would like to ask a question. My name is Florencia, and I work for the legislation in Argentina, and I have two questions. I don't know if you had access to the draft resolution of Representative Buffy, and when we comparing the two draft resolutions, the general views is that one protects more the owner rights than the other. And this facilitates some dialogue in terms of the more protective you are with owners' rights, is detrimental to possible innovations or changes. So these are two general outlooks or the way we see this in public policy. How would you go about this? How would you approach this if you're still discussing this possibility? And the question has to do with the responsible parties. Who's going to be responsible for this? Because many times you have teams behind the owner or the responsibility. So who's going to bear that responsibility? Okay, before you take this question, let me ask if there's another question. Yes. It's great to have this technical and political view to make this draft resolution possible. It's part of the flexibility to regulate, because sometimes you get confused with the non or the lack of regulation. My name is Marta Moneda from the University of Avellaneda, and you are underscoring a very important protective regime, as she said. Also, you mentioned the idea of consent, that formally you had a legal category, a very well-informed consent, and protected from the legal point of view. Have you thought in the agency any instrument for practical applications or enforcements? For example, somebody that has had their rights infringed and the well-informed consent is non-existent. Have you thought any procedures in order to intervene institutionally in this kind of situations? My name is Luz, and I come from the public sector of the city of Buenos Aires, and I work in communications, so I've been in touch and involved with the data protection law. Thank you very much for making this offer and for making this in an open way. It's great to see these changes and to see a draft resolution that is new for Argentina. And the figure of the delegate that is so new, so we can control what is done with the personal data. You don't have the possibility to certify yourself as a delegate, for example, in Spain, that is in line with the European vision, but we are not borrowing this. Can you certify delegates in Argentina under this draft resolution? And by this certification, we comply with the roles or the responsibility in the public sector or the private sector or whatever. First and foremost, yes, we are going to be certifying. We are assessing or evaluating some of the alternatives. The first effort that we make is to drive this new law. However, we're evaluating all the alternatives. I don't believe that the agency is going to certify. However, we believe that it's good to have certification instances and to promote the culture and training in data protection. The idea is to make progress in that regard, and there's something specific that is included in the draft resolution. And then, yeah, we need to work on the part of the agency to implement this, obviously. We put at the core the owner's rights. Yes, I know that that is the case. We are in line with the 2018 draft resolution that was promoted or filed by the agency that was submitted by Representative Buffy in Congress. There may be supplementary information, but I do not believe that guaranteeing the right to data protection or personal data protection is detrimental to technological advance. On the contrary, if we have clear rules of the games and that they clarify a shared vision on the future, because we're speaking of the future of the development of the country or of a region, we believe that this is the case, this is essential. So based on these regulations, nothing of what is being done and nothing that is going to be planned in terms of business planning or innovation is going to be discontinued by this concept. But we are going to improve the rules of the game and the public and private partnership in order to promote developing this concept. That is our intent. Also consent. The other pillar is consent. So today we receive many complaints by people of any sort, complaints of any sorts, and we're going to be responsible for articulating all the necessary channels to take those complaints and to enforce them. And that's why this regulation is so important. Right now, we do not have any tools to intervene in wrongdoing of personal data or other issues. So we need a wide range of instruments to assist in every case. For example, we have a person, this is a case that filed a complaint because in its parish, he wanted to file for data suppression and he filed a claim. So I cannot enforce the parish the same instrument or the same decision that I apply or I enforce to a private company. I need a wide range of instruments or tools to intervene and especially to apply it to stakeholders that the element of which is not the business of personal data processing. So there's a wide range of protocols, instruments, and I believe that this is going to be worked once we have the law in place. We are doing it with the current law, but however, this is going to be much better once we have the new law in place. How do we define responsible party? Well, this is clearly defined as an organization beyond whether it is a team or a person. The responsible party or the people in charge are concepts that are included or described by all legislations. Those are the existing parties, and that's why you describe them in that language. The important is how we define those parties, and I believe that we have clear definitions, so they've been defined very clearly in the draft resolution. We have another question, 3 more questions. My name is Federico Pereira. I started political science in Argentina in Torquato di Tella University. And my question is in connection with the political negotiation of the draft resolution, not only with the opposition, but also within your administration. If you're going to have the express support of the incumbent administration, the executive, and the other stakeholders considering the political situation of Argentina in order not to operate in a vacuum once this draft resolution arrives in Congress. My name is Adrian from Argentina. You discussed briefly the process, the acceleration, being tactical, and the 2000 draft resolution that was not discussed in Congress. The idea was if we file the draft resolution right now, especially if we have elections coming up, or probably you can file it next year. So the 2 years would be effective to treat this in Congress. And somebody from abroad here, Prevision. Yes, good morning. You discuss the level of treatment. What is the level of treatment? Because you have two countries in Latin America, Uruguay and Argentina. And I've seen it, or I've read this, especially with some people that talked about digital rights. Will this be accelerating this approval process? Let me take her first question, then the politics. Basically, the assessment is very comprehensive of rules, authorities, the institutions in countries, and indeed, in this adequate process, we are treating other figures. We are a signatory of the 108 Convention and 108 plus of the Council of Europe. This was passed in the House of Representatives and is about to be passed in the Senate. The adequate process allows for cross-border flow of data more directly. And this is an economic asset for countries. So in that regard, we consider that Argentina intends to be a member country or an appropriate member for the European Union, allowing this flow of data that has this protection umbrella that is guaranteed by the institution assessments of the European Union. So we are signatories and we are subjects to that assessment. All the efforts made in proposing new regulations are well received or are welcomed. And the 108 plus convention is very similar to the European regulations, but in the case of a treaty or in the form of a treaty, it comes to guide some perspectives. However, we believe that the first regulation framework has to do with the personal data law at the national level, apart from the convention. And addressing the political question that was asked. Not so long ago in the Constitutional Affairs Commission, the 108 plus convention was approved with all the votes of the majority. So it was welcome in Congress. We know that these are not the typical topics that are dealt in Congress, but these are more intangible topics that require certain expertise. However, we see strategies to reach or to seek this sort of consensus. I believe that this is a draft resolution apart from the differences or disagreements between the opposition and the incumbent administration. This intends to protect human rights and to drive economic development. So this convergence of these two key issues that are the core to our democracy could drive, in a way, a good adoption, apart from the difficult issues that may be widely discussed. Once they are discussed, these issues. But these discussions are welcome because the best law depends on the best technical construction and the best political dialogue. And this is mandated by our democracy and eventually is the result of what is going to reflect the direction of a country revolving around this issue. My idea is to submit it this year. We know that we're about to finish the year, but however, we are making the last efforts to file or to submit it before Congress this year. I think that this is going to be defined at the end of the year. One or two questions more? Yeah. Good morning. My name is Mario. I study advertising in Brazil. I don't speak Spanish that well. However, I can ask this question. How do public and private can raise awareness for the young generation that are not concerned with security of personal data? And they deliver it without thinking in applications like TikTok and other websites. Do you have a special plan for this purpose? For raising awareness, okay. We are faced with this challenge not only in personal data protection, but also in security or in other fields where we operate. I believe that we have to start either with raising campaigns, awareness campaigns of public goods and content that could be addressed probably in schools by non-for-profit organizations that work with children or with international organizations. We have United Nations organizations like UNICEF or others that probably could help us with this approach so we can raise awareness for children to have the necessary tools. We believe that this is a great challenge, and I believe that this is one of the main points that makes this law to be firmly embedded in the citizenry, because all children, mothers, parents are concerned with personal data. So we believe that this could really change the needle to approach these intangible concepts to the reality of what these families are living through. Thank you very much, Beatriz, for taking the time to come and address this topic here. Thank you very much for coming and I'm sorry that we got delayed with your talk, but thank you very much. It's a pleasure. Thank you for taking the questions. We're going to break for coffee, and the next panel is going to be in English. So if you do require simultaneous interpretation, please get their infrared receivers. Thank you.